All right, here we go. So this week in phonetics, we're looking at suprasegmentals. This can be a really broad topic with lots of tempting side trails. I'll do my best to stick to the content that you're really responsible for in the textbook. As usual, this video will review what happened last week, preview this week's material, and note the important dates that are coming up this week. Last week capped our 4-week marathon of acoustics with an in-depth look at the acoustic characteristics of different classes of speech sounds. We also had the 4th graded quiz, which a lot of people found quite challenging, but that's all behind us now. This week, we're concerned with suprasegmental phenomena, that is, phonetic things that can span multiple segments. The textbook titles this chapter Syllables and Suprasegmentals because many of the phonetic features that span multiple segments are spanning syllable-like units. You could also say that because they tend to span multiple segments, syllables themselves are a suprasegmental property of language. I don't think that's a common perspective, and probably because a syllable is at one level just a sequence of one or more segments organized in a particular way. So calling them a syllable isn't necessarily identifying any new property. If you're feeling philosophical, you could ask, is a syllable more than the sum of its segments? We're not going to do that in this video. We've got enough to cover anyway, but think about it. Right. At any rate, syllable structure is where we start. My favorite definition of a syllable is that it is a sequence of sounds with a single sonority peak. That requires knowing what sonority is and how to identify the sonority of different classes of speech sounds. That's presented in the textbook, and I have a slightly more in-depth look at it in my introductory linguistics class as part of the phonology module. If you didn't get that, or you want a refresher, you want a slightly different perspective than what our phonetics textbook gives, I'm linking the relevant video from my introductory course in the description of this video. So the key concepts basically are sonority and the parts of the syllable, the onset, nucleus, coda, and the rhyme. There are differences between languages about how complex onsets can be, whether codas are allowed and how complex they can be, about exactly what sounds are allowed in the nucleus, but the basic idea of a sequence with one sonority peak is common across languages. And as already mentioned, many of the other suprasegmental aspects that we're going to look at revolve around things happening to syllables and syllable-sized bits. So the next concept we come across is stress, and this is a very important part of English pronunciation. I would say that for all the muddle of English spelling in many ways, stress is the most important thing that isn't indicated at all in our writing system, and the record pair illustrates it quite nicely. When you're considering stress, you should remember what's common across languages and what differs. It's common that stress is a property that applies to syllables, and that it's expressed through some combination of duration, fundamental frequency, amplitude, and vowel quality. What differs is exactly which of those 4 properties participates and how, as well as the relative timing across syllables. Is it a stress-timed language or a syllable-timed language? We also get a quick look at mora timing in the chapter, which is illustrated with Japanese. Then we look at changes in stress, comparing strong and weak forms of words, and observing stress shift within a word. Now, stress makes a syllable prominent within a word, but a very similar phenomenon is seen at the phrase level with pitch accent or nuclear accent. So those are 2 terms for the same thing. And the main thing I want to sort of wave my hands about here is the use of the term pitch accent. So here it refers to the stress that a syllable takes to make that word prominent in a phrase or sentence. But there's another use of the term pitch accent, which we're going to see at the end of the chapter, and that's used to identify a type of language based on how it uses pitch to mark out prominent syllables. So this duplication of terms, I think it's a symptom of the kind of still unsettled nature of our understanding of some of these suprasegmental phenomena. It's important given that these are the terms we have, It's important when talking about, or say taking quizzes about, suprasegmental phenomena to be clear about the role of a syllable in a phrase or the way a language marks out a distinctive syllable in a word, so you don't confuse one sort of pitch accent with the other. Okay, the next suprasegmental property we come across is length. And I'm going to wave my hands again and jump up and down. I want to draw your attention to the fact that phoneticians mean something different by length than what we mean by duration. Duration is a physical measure of time, usually reported in milliseconds if we're talking about individual segments, or maybe seconds if we're talking about larger phrases. Length, on the other hand, is a linguistic feature that can vary between usually two levels, short and long. And we have symbols in the IPA to indicate that. It's kind of like how vowels are distinctive categories in language, right? E, A, A, O, U, for example. But acoustically, they're signaled by formant frequencies, which can vary continuously. The physical measure is in a continuous range. The linguistic entity is categorical. Duration is physical. Duration can vary along a continuum. Length is linguistic and categorical. It has generally two categories. After discussing geminates, the textbook moves into a long list of things that can affect the duration of segments and groups of segments, from final lengthening to speaking rate. And I encourage everyone to use the term duration and not length to discuss these phenomena, because they're generally not about categorical linguistic changes, but about contextual effects on the exact amount of time spent producing segments. The last section in the chapter, probably the biggest one, deals with tone and intonation. Now, tone is that phenomenon most known in several East Asian languages, such as Mandarin Chinese, although it is found in many other languages, including some indigenous languages found in Canada. A tone language assigns a distinctive tone pattern to each syllable, or pitch pattern. Languages with register tones assign an overall pitch level to each syllable. Languages with contour tones also specify a shape, such as rising, level, falling, or even rising and falling, or some other complex pattern. In this section, we also learn about one way that tones can appear in a language over time, the delightfully named process of tonogenesis. So now tone is about contrasts on individual syllables. Intonation, on the other hand, is about the whole phrase or utterance, about pitch contours that can span multiple words, signaling a statement versus a question, or emphasis of one part of an utterance relative to another. That's that first kind of pitch accent that we looked at earlier on. Or even identifying the boundary between phrases. I go along talking about one phrase and then I pitch resets so that I can start another phrase, that kind of thing. And then it actually closes with that other kind of pitch accent, which is most famously illustrated with Japanese, where a particular syllable gets marked as special, and that determines the pitch contour for the whole word. And that's different from tone, where each syllable gets a special pitch identity or tone. Yeah. Okay. So as with pretty much every topic in this course, there are whole textbooks digging deeper, right? Tone, intonation, and all the rest. But for now, we'll be content with the chapter in our textbook. So now at this point, we've finished the articulatory and acoustic aspects of the course, and the remainder is on the auditory side of phonetics. First, the physiology of hearing, and then speech perception. Okay, so that's this week's content. The second lab assignment is due on Tuesday this week, March 23rd. It's the the day after I'm posting this video. Before you submit, do make sure to double check in the assignment text that you've done everything that's asked, and don't forget to submit both the sound file you analyzed and your write-up. Okay, 2 files. Next week will be the quiz covering the material from weeks 9 and 10, the acoustics of speech sound and suprasegmentals. That's it for this video. I hope to see you at Tuesday's tutorial.